Welcome to the deep dive, where we cut through the noise. Have you ever been deep in a project juggling data between different design tools, maybe Revit, Tekla, Rhino,
Oh, absolutely. All the time.
and you just find yourself constantly battling misalignments or outdated information, or maybe just huge file transfers that slow everything down?
Yeah, that synchronization headache. It's a classic AEC problem.
Exactly. Well, today we're doing a deep dive into something exciting, a development aimed right at that problem. We're focusing on the general availability of the Autodesk Data Exchange connector for Revit. Now, our insights today come directly from Autodesk's own announcements and their technical descriptions.
Right, the official sources.
And our mission really is to help you quickly see how this connector could genuinely streamline your workflows,
Yeah.
how it boosts collaboration, and maybe even helps you make better data-driven decisions.
Yeah, translating that tech speak into practical value.
Precisely. We want to turn this, potentially dense announcement into clear, actionable insights for you. So at its core, what does it do? Well, it makes it much easier to exchange subsets of data between Revit and other key applications.
That subset part is important, right?
It really is. We're talking about sending only the specific info you need, like just the structural frame from Revit to Tekla, maybe, or door fire ratings to PowerBI.
Instead of the whole massive model every single time.
Exactly. So it's much faster, much more targeted, a real game changer for speed and maybe even security too. Okay, so let's unpack this a bit more. The big news here is that this connector, the Autodesk Data Exchange connector for Revit, it's officially out of public beta.
Right. It's generally available now.
Which means it's fully supported by Autodesk, ready for, day-to-day production work. It's past the testing phase, ready for prime time.
Yeah, and the real aha moment here, I think, is how it shifts the burden.
Yeah.
Instead of you manually checking if everything lines up,
Yeah.
it automates a lot of that integration.
Right.
Think of it less like a simple file converter and more like a universal translator for your design data.
Interesting analogy.
It lets different disciplines, multidisciplinary teams, finally speak the same precise language without getting bogged down in conversion errors or those huge file transfers we mentioned.
Right.
It's not just saving clicks, though. It's unlocking a level of real-time coordination that used to feel impossible unless you were in a totally closed system.
So it helps with coordination, analysis, visualization.
Exactly. And it really improves documentation workflows, too. Simplifies drawing creation because you're sharing reference geometries, properties, making sure everyone's on the same page with current info.
And it really does open up the conversation across a lot of different applications, doesn't it?
It does. You mentioned some key ones: direct interoperability with tools like Rhino, Inventor, Dynamo, Tekla.
And PowerBI, which we'll get to.
And PowerBI, yes. That kind of reach is pretty impressive.
So I'm really interested in how this tackles coordination, beyond just swapping files. We've all had that pain point, right? The architect's model doesn't quite match the structural...
Pointing to endless RFIs.
Exactly. So how does this connector specifically make coordination and documentation better? How does it hit those challenges head on?
Yeah, you've hit on a really critical point there. It has features that directly address those real-world collaboration headaches. Let's start with just precision and organization.
Okay.
One big improvement is something they call flexible positioning for precise alignment.
Flexible positioning. What does that mean in practice?
Well, it's not just, dragging and dropping and hoping for the best. It actually uses things like shared coordinates or user-defined origin points that are embedded in the exchange data.
Ah, okay. So it knows where things should go.
Yeah, precisely. So say a structural model coming from Tekla can snap exactly into place within the architectural Revit model, respecting the building's actual geographic location. It cuts out all that manual nudging and adjusting that used to plague big federated models.
Okay, that sounds like a massive time saver right there. And then you mentioned organization, something about group creation.
Yes, group creation for better organization.
How does grouping exchanged elements inside Revit help? What's a common problem this avoids?
Well, think about it. Without good grouping, when you bring in external data, it can just feel like this chaotic pile of, individual lines and objects.
Right, hard to manage.
Super hard. Difficult to track, difficult to even know what's what, especially when updates come in. Grouping lets teams treat these imported elements as logical sets. Like all the structural beams from Tekla could be one group.
Okay, that makes sense.
It just makes communication way clearer between disciplines, and it really simplifies handling updates. Teams can easily see and manage exactly which bits have been exchanged and coordinated. It brings order to potential chaos.
And building on that idea of updates, the ability to easily update references when things change downstream, say in Tekla or Inventor or Rhino, how does that help the project's speed and reliability?
It's all about keeping things in sync and reducing risk.
Oh.
This feature means your main Revit model stays current with the latest coordinated data from those other tools, but crucially, without needing a full disruptive re-import every time.
Ah, okay.
So the big benefit for you is cutting down the risk of using outdated information in your documents, or even worse, finding costly clashes later because models weren't aligned.
Yeah, nobody wants that.
Imagine you get an updated structural model from Tekla. With just a few clicks, your Revit model reflects those changes. But importantly, without breaking existing links or losing your annotation context, that's a huge step for model integrity.
Okay, so that's coordination. But beyond just getting the models aligned, you mentioned it has robust documentation and integration. This sounds really powerful for the people actually producing the drawing sets.
Absolutely.
Like preserving annotations dimensions, tags when you reload updated exchanges. How does that cut down on rework?
Oh, massively. This is critical for documentation integrity. As the design evolves, your annotations stick with the data. So you're not spending hours redimensioning or retagging things every single time an update comes through.
Right. Tedious work.
Exactly. Your documentation stays accurate and consistent with the design, more or less automatically. It's a huge efficiency boost, freeing up designers from that repetitive grind.
And the idea that exchange data can be used as a reference in documentation. What does that mean for you if you're making drawings? Producing accurate stuff without importing the whole heavy model.
It means better quality drawings without killing your performance. You can reference specific geometry from an exchange, say the outline of a structural beam,
Right.
directly in your Revit view without bloating your file with tons of unnecessary data.
Ah,
You pull in just what you need for clear, precise drawings, but without the overhead of importing, the entire federated model, which can really slow things down.
Okay. And finally, on the documentation front, applying standard Revit tools like filters, view templates, annotations directly to this exchange data. How does that make the workflow seamless? What's the aha moment there for someone used to manual imports?
The aha moment is probably realizing that this imported data starts to behave almost like its native Revit geometry, at least when it comes to documenting it.
Okay.
It ensures that anything you bring in aligns visually, contextually with your project's standards. You can use all your normal Revit tools, your filters, view templates, annotation styles to keep everything looking consistent.
So it feels integrated, not bolted on.
Exactly. It makes integrating that external data feel truly seamless within your documentation process, rather than this separate kind of awkward step. You're bringing external data into your established Revit environment. So, if we tie all these different capabilities together, the bigger picture is that this data exchange connector really becomes a powerful hub for multidisciplinary collaboration.
Yeah.
It bridges that gap between design intent, the coordination process, and final documentation, all in a more unified workflow. It really positions Revit as a central point for bringing in this DX data from multiple places without all those painful, repetitive import-export cycles.
Better alignment, consistent docs.
Across the board.
And just to give you a really practical example of how that workflow might look, you could say, create a data exchange right from your Revit model. Maybe you tailor it using a specific 3D view to only include certain work sets or categories relevant to the structural engineer.
Okay, so you filter it first.
Right. Then you export only that specific data to a tool like Tekla for detailed structural modeling and coordination. Then, and this is key, you can re-import that enhanced structural data back from Tekla into Revit.
Closing the loop.
Exactly. Enriching your main model with those coordinated details. And that, in turn, lets you produce really precise drawings directly from Revit based on that coordinated info. It's a continuous informed cycle. So that covers how it streamlines the design side of things. But you mentioned Power BI earlier. What if we could take this same robust data exchange and use it for like real-time business insights?
Yeah, that's where connecting Revit data to platforms like Power BI really opens up some exciting possibilities.
How does the connector help share Revit data specifically with something like Power BI?
Well, this unlocks some genuinely powerful new workflows for you. It extends the value of your design data way beyond just the geometry in the model.
Okay, like what?
One key example is creating what you might call QA/QC dashboards. Imagine, instead of manually spot-checking hundreds of doors in Revit to make sure they have the right fire rating or accessibility info.
Which takes forever.
Right. Instead, the connector automatically pulls just that specific data door types, parameters like fire rating, maybe widths, and pushes it to a Power BI dashboard.
Ah, okay. Visualized.
Exactly. And that dashboard can instantly highlight any missing information or inconsistencies, maybe doors below a certain width, right across your entire project. It becomes like an automated health check for your model's data integrity. And these dashboards can flag, inconsistencies, missing data points, deviations from project standards. It really empowers BIM coordinators or QA managers to catch quality issues much, much earlier.
Proactive rather than reactive.
Precisely. And you can track it across multiple projects, too. It turns quality control into this ongoing, data-driven process.
And it's not just limited to the geometry or the parameters in the Revit model itself, right? The source mentioned combining model data with other sources, like asset data from Autodesk Build via the data connector.
That's right. So you're enriching the design data with operational data, potentially, or cost data, or schedule data. You can start overlaying different data sets.
So how do these interactive dashboards, maybe filtered by discipline or project phase or building location, how do they actually simplify decision-making? Especially when you're sharing insights with stakeholders who aren't necessarily BIM experts.
Yeah, that's a great question. They basically act as a bridge. They translate that complex design data into something much more digestible for business users or clients or project managers.
Okay.
By simplifying the insights into clear, interactive visuals, charts, graphs, highlighted tables, stakeholders can quickly grasp key information. Maybe it's cost implications per square foot for different design options, or tracking the completion percentage of specific work packages.
So it makes the data accessible.
Exactly. It leads to more informed decisions, definitely improves transparency, because everyone's looking at the same picture, even if they don't know how to navigate Revit. You're giving them a direct, understandable window into the project's health and progress, all powered by that underlying BIM data.
Okay, so just to kind of recap the value here, this new tool, the Autodesk Data Exchange Connector for Revit, it seems to really hit those long-standing challenges. Data exchange, coordination, documentation.
Yeah, big ones.
And, as we just discussed, it also gives you the tools, the numbers, the visuals to make smarter, faster decisions using the data itself, which feels pretty critical today.
Absolutely. Data-driven insights are key.
So if you're listening and you're thinking, okay, I want to try this, you can actually download the Data Exchange Connector for Revit today. Just one note. It currently supports Revit 2024 and later versions.
Right, 2024 and up. And we definitely encourage you to check out the video tutorials and the documentation Autodesk has put out. They're pretty good resources to get you up and running quickly.
Good tip.
And, if you do have questions or run into any bumps, support is available. There's an Autodesk Data Exchange community forum, or you can email their support team directly. Honestly, this general availability release, it feels like a really significant step in Autodesk's broader mission to deliver, truly robust, open interoperability for the AEC industry. It's exciting to see that level of commitment to genuinely connected workflows.
So wrapping things up, what does this all mean long term? It's worth thinking about the impact of this kind of seamless, targeted data exchange on the future. How might this level of interoperability really change how multidisciplinary teams work together, how they innovate?
Especially as things like AI and automation become more common.
Exactly. What new possibilities does this kind of universal data translator open up for maybe your next big project? Something to think about.